Good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, Transport Evolved. Well, it's Friday again, and I really like doing the shows on Fridays because it means I get to say TGIF. And believe me, we've been working so hard this week with all the news stories and the visitors and the websites and the YouTube videos that we really do need a weekend off, which is why I'm glad that you are taking a weekend off, Mark, and so am I. This is also to serve as a note to anybody who likes watching Transport Evolve live on a Sunday that we're not going to have a live show this Sunday. In fact, it's going to be recorded this afternoon just after I finished this and then uploaded and pushed live just as the show would normally be live on a Sunday. On to your thoughts from yesterday. As always, I have a huge number of notes. You talked about hydrogen being an electric car rival, Mark, and I think you're right. Electric cars and hydrogen fuel cell cars are rivals, but only because gas companies are backing hydrogen. Why are they backing hydrogen, you ask? Because one day, gas companies know there won't be any more petroleum byproduct to sell people to put in their cars. So they need something else to sell to people in the same way that they've been selling gasoline for the past 100 years. Hydrogen, unlike gasoline, as you quite rightly pointed out, can't be pumped outside of a fueling station, so it also locks people in. They have to go to the fuel station, and that's one of the reasons why hydrogen is so lucrative to the industry. As to range, you're quite right. Hydrogen fuel cell cars don't have a great range, and if there isn't a fuel cell filling station anywhere near you, you do have to drive a long way to fill up. But that's just like gasoline cars, except you can't have the jerry can in the boot. But a point to note here is that during the 2012 Olympics, London had to send its hydrogen-powered taxi cabs out of London all the way to Swindon on the back of a low loader to be filled up with hydrogen fuel because, well, to have a hydrogen fuel cells filling station live and active in London during the Olympics was considered too much of a security threat. Chargemaster, oh. As you point out, Chargemaster's tariffs are a little bit on the expensive side, and I'll admit they're expensive for me too. What gets my goat is that if you own a car with a 3.3 kilowatt onboard charger but you only have a Type 2 to Type 1 cable, i.e. the cable that the rest of the automotive industry in Europe has been trying to get everyone to use for the past 3 years, you end up paying a far lot more than you would be if you just plugged into a 13 amp outlet. So that's not particularly fair. Also, £8.50 for a rapid charge for just 30 minutes. I totally get where you're coming from. My Nissan Leaf takes about 45 minutes now to charge from empty to about 80% full, especially in cold weather, because my car's got nearly 51,000 miles on the clock and it's 3 years old. I would pay for rapid charging if I knew it was reliable all the time. If I knew I could turn up at a rapid charging station and it was like a supercharger station and there was always some kind of redundancy, I'd pay quite happily £5–10 to fully charge my car. What I do like is the West Coast Electric Highways route, which is $19.99 unlimited rapid charging throughout the state of Washington. Or I think it's $7 or $7.50 for each rapid charge. That makes far more sense from a monetary point of view, especially if you don't do very long distance trips very often but need to make them every now and then. We should also, of course, point out that there are other networks, including Ecotricity, who are still free. Essentially, people just want to pay an appropriate amount for the electricity they use. I'd argue that a premium of 200% over ordinary prices would be okay, but anything higher than that is just pure extortion. But what do I want to talk to you about today, Mark? Average EV drivers. Who is an average EV driver? There's this general consensus going around that EVs are just too expensive for your average man or woman in the street to afford, and that anyone who owns an EV is a middle or upper class snob, essentially one of the top 1%. But you and I know that's not true because you and I don't fit into the top 1%. In fact, I can't think of anybody that I know who owns an EV who fits into the top 1%. I bet that a large proportion of people out there could afford an EV and don't even know it. So the question I have for you today, Mark, is how do we tell people that EVs are actually quite affordable today? How do we encourage everyday people to buy an EV? Our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues. Because frankly, I'm fed up with the idea that just rich people buy EVs. I have friends who are in fairly low paid jobs and they have EVs. They bought EVs to save money. They didn't buy an EV to go, look at me, I've got more money than you think I have. They just bought it to save money because it's cheaper, it's fun to drive, and it's less hassle than a petrol car. I wish I knew what the answer was, and I just want to encourage more people to drive EVs. I hope you have a really good weekend. I'm glad you're having the weekend off. I hope you have a lovely time at your in-laws, and I'll see you and everybody else on Monday. Bye, everybody.